Awesome. That way folks can see this when they get the chance. So that's it on my end. This is really your show and everyone's here's opportunity to give input, get feedback from you. So with that, thank you for the opportunity to say hi to folks.
Absolutely, and thank you for joining us, and thank you to all of you all for taking some time out of your afternoon here to learn about the traffic calming project that is proposed on this section of Bowling Avenue. As you may have heard, and as was alluded to, these meetings are recorded. We'll make this available to you, really to anyone through the NDOT traffic calming website within a couple of days of this meeting. So at the end of the presentation, I'll give you a link to where you can find that. So if you have a neighbor that wasn't able to join us tonight, or if you just want to go back and refresh yourself on what was said, you have the opportunity to do that. I'm gonna one more housekeeping thing, I guess. Yeah, we mentioned if you can keep your microphone muted, that usually works the best. However, we try to keep these as much as possible. So feel free to unmute yourself, and if you have questions as we go through the meeting, you have the ability to do that. And just ask away. We'll be glad to address that. I'm going to share my screen now, so you'll see. Hopefully, you will see more of a presentation mode. All of our pictures might disappear, might get small, but hopefully, you're seeing the Bowling Avenue slide there. A couple of things that we're going to do tonight, just go through some basic information that is common to all of our traffic calming projects, about a little bit about the program, and specifically how bowling got inducted into this program. We want to hear from you, obviously, about issues that you may be seeing on your street. We're going to talk to you about some of the tools that we have available in our toolbox, and then maybe the most important thing for us and for you all, we want to give you all a good amount of time to see the very preliminary concept that we have put together, get your feedback on that, and that will be helpful to us as we move forward in developing a more fleshed out project for the street. And then we'll spend some time talking about next steps as well. The QR code that you see on this slide is helpful as well. This is a relatively new way to get feedback for Metro and for NDOT specifically. You can scan that, and it will take you to a page where all of our traffic calming program projects now have a presence. This allows you to do any kind of feedback. If you want to, you can put little push pins on a map and tell us where you're seeing issues and things like that. So specific to bowling, that may be helpful to you as well. All right, a little bit about the program. This is a residential street program. At this point, I try not to take for granted that everybody has seen some of our work in traffic calming, but most of you probably have encountered a street that has been traffic calmed, usually in the form of speed cushions. We'll talk about that. But you're probably seeing those on residential streets, and you're probably seeing more physical solutions. We are proposing more and more things that you either have to drive over or have to drive around. We find those to be the most effective way to slow traffic down in our neighborhoods. And we do focus on that speed reduction as opposed to trying to push traffic to other streets in the neighborhood. That's not what we want to do. Some people wish we could do that and hope for us to do that. But our objective is to really keep traffic where it is, and just get folks to drive more responsibly when they're in your neighborhood. We do recognize that this is not the only way to go about this issue of speeding. Engineering is what we do and what NDOT has within its wheelhouse, but certainly we try to partner as much as we can with MNPD on the enforcement side. A lot of people ask, as part of these projects, can't we just get an officer out here to write some tickets? Wouldn't that be a great thing? And I agree, in most cases it would. However, we probably all recognize that the police department is out doing a lot of very important other work, and they just often don't have a lot of resources to dedicate to traffic and enforcement. The other part of it is education, just intending to make sure that we're getting the message out in terms of the impact of speed and why we want people to slow down and all those types of things. So we try to have a bit of a balanced um, uh, plan to address the speeding issue. But what we're talking about here today, by and large, is engineering, doing things within the right of way of the street that will bring about slower speeds. And we like to show this chart because it kind of gives at least one piece of why we think this is important. We know that speeding has a real safety impact, as well as just a quality of life one in residential neighborhoods. But when it comes to sharing the street with other users, whether those are walkers, bicyclers, transit users, whatever, we know that speed can have a very detrimental impact on the ability of other folks to use those streets. You guys have a very nice, well sidewalked neighborhood, and we want people to use those. That's really an important mode of travel, and becoming increasingly so as you all have transit options and so forth. And so this slide kind of demonstrates that. We also like to show this because just to let you know that you are not alone in some of the speeding issues that you have seen in the neighborhood. Right now in this program, this is an application-based program. We only come to neighborhoods where we are asked to do that. And so you all submitted an application at some point, and so have a lot of other folks. And so right now we're sitting on about a backlog of about 600 streets just like this section of Bowling, where people have said, hey, we have this issue. We wish you could come do something about it. So fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, you guys have been in the top 25 for this selection cycle. We do 50 a year currently, and so we do those in 2 windows of 25 each. And we kind of take the worst offenders, and congratulations, you're one of those, I guess. So we are here. There, at this point, there's not a funding question. It's more about how do we work together to come up with a project that you guys are supportive of and that we think will do the job to bring about slower speeds here. And we'll talk more about that. We also like to plug Hub Nashville. If you're not aware of Hub Nashville, it's a great resource. You can go to hub.nashville.gov or just pick up the phone and call 311. And this is a clearinghouse for all things requested of your local government. And so it's a wonderful service for those of us in Davidson County. All of those service requests are tracked. The reason we bring it up here is because sometimes in the course of these meetings, someone might ask for something that's a little bit outside of what we can offer. Sidewalks is a good example. We get requests for sidewalks often, as you would imagine. And we have to tell them, sorry, this is not the format for that, but that is certainly a valid request, and something like that can be made at hubnashville.gov. And that's not just NDOT, by the way. Pretty much every department in Metro is represented there for things that constituents may request. But this is the formula for how we derive what streets we're going to move forward with in offering some traffic calming assistance. Once an application comes in, we get busy collecting a lot of data. And so, as I mentioned, we got 600 streets. We've collected 600 streets worth of data. We've got a lot of data out there that helps us determine where the highest needs are in terms of traffic calming. About 70% of the score that we use are things that you probably would have guessed. It's how fast traffic is going and how much traffic there is, how many cars there are on the street every day. So we look at those things, but we also look at 30% of the score is other types of users. Are there sidewalks on the street or not? Is there transit service in the area or not? And then also, are there destinations that may make a walking trip or a bicycling trip more common, such as you guys have a great park over across the street from you. That would be an example. That, along with West End Middle and the school there, and those types of things help us drive the score for where traffic calming project might be more needed. And then lastly, is there a recorded instance of a pedestrian crash on the street? We look at all of that data for all of these streets and come up with a score for all of those things and roll that all in. And if you're in the top 25, we select you to move forward with a project. Specific to bowling, here's the data we collected. So the 85th percentile speed is just a statistical way that in our industry we look at speeding issues. It's 32 on the street, not the highest that we have in our program, but high enough when you look at all of the other data that we collect to become into the program. One of those is a good example is the volume. That's on the higher end. You guys have over 3,800 cars a day. I don't know if that's surprising to you or not. That's a fairly healthy traffic volume, but not out of the ordinary. We will do traffic calming like what we're going to talk about tonight on a street up to about 5,000 cars a day. So we're well within our thresholds for doing one of these types of projects. We do look at the street width. That makes a big difference when we start designing what a project would look like. Your street's pretty unique there. It started obviously not all 23 feet wide. That's the section down more on the Murphy end of the road. But the southern part, closer to West End, of course, has that big, nice grass median in it. So that adds a little bit of a different wrinkle. So the 23 feet there is on the northern end. And then the length of the project is just about 0.4 of a mile. I just saw a comment pop up, and I'm going to do my best to kind of monitor those chat comments. Thank you for sending that. I'm not sure why it's not showing up. There they are. But I did see that. And so the question was, how long was that data collected for? Great question. This is kind of a secret of traffic data collection. Those are almost always for just a 24-hour period. And we look at a lot of traffic data, and it's uncanny how consistent that is over the course of a day. So we know some days are higher than others, but it doesn't vary that much. And so, but it's a pretty short window in terms of how the period of traffic data. Good question. Go ahead. I hear someone that wants to say something. Go ahead.
Jeff, there's one more question there right after Matthews. There's a question from Lee. How many pedestrian incidents have resulted in any injury?
Yeah, I don't have that. I can go back and look. When we collect the data, all it takes is one. If to get the points in that category, if there is a documented pedestrian crash, you get all the points. It's kind of an all or nothing. But I can't tell you right now if Bowling Avenue even has one, if it got the points for that or not. But we don't look right now, currently, we don't look at injuries at all. It's just if there has been a pedestrian crash. Now, it probably stands to reason in many, many cases, far outweighing the experience of a traffic crash. If there is a pedestrian crash, the likelihood is there's going to be an injury there. But we're just looking for the presence of a pedestrian crash. That's all. Good questions. All right, so we'd like to show this map. This is a snapshot from an interactive map that you all have access to if you want to on the Metro Traffic Calming website. And it shows the status of all the traffic calming projects in the county. And right now, Bowling, where you see the big yellow arrow pointing to Bowling, it's colored red just because it's a new project. We're in this phase that we are now where we're talking to you and trying to develop the project more fully. But what may be of more interest and what we like to point out here is there's some other colors as well. You see some purple lines on the map. One of them's on Central, one of them's on West Lawn, one of them's on Whitland, south of West End. Those just mean that we have an application in our possession. Someone has applied for traffic calming on those streets. It has not been selected, but just so you know, if you're ever curious as to, is there another street in my area that has already received an application, you can go here and you can see that. The other one, which is beginning, the more projects we do, is beginning to lose probably some of its importance, but it may still be of interest to you, and that is, where have other traffic calming projects been implemented? And those are put in with blue lines, specifically the blue dotted lines that you see there. That usually means that there have been speed cushions put in on the street. So the closest ones to you are just up the way there in Sylvan Park. We just did a fairly large project a couple of years ago, I guess, on Nebraska and some of the other cross streets there. So gives you an opportunity, if you're not familiar with speed cushions, where you could go and see those and drive over those and so forth. I will say here, I know this question is going to come up. The limits of this project are shown in red, and it does go all the way from Murphy Road to West End. There is a traffic signal on both ends of that. We're going to look at the specifics of that in just a minute, but that whole segment there is fair game for our traffic calming project. All right, a couple of the tools in our toolkit that I'll run through. Again, you're probably familiar with at least some of these, but the bread and butter has really become of our program has become the speed cushion. I've referred to it a couple of times. You've probably seen them. They're made out of, it's a manufactured, very high density recycled rubber. We like them because we order these. We don't site build them. They come off of the factory this way. And that gives us a lot of consistency. We know how they feel when we put them in. We know how to place them. We know how well they hold up, all of those things. And so it's consistent from one street to the next. They are 6 feet wide. They're all the same width, like in the direction of the wheelbase, and that's wide enough that no vehicle really can straddle that completely. Some vehicles have an easier time than others, and those would be things like ambulances, fire trucks, those types of emergency responders. We want them to be a little closer to straddling them. We don't want to slow those vehicles down as much, and so that's the reason behind these kind of breaks in between, or these cushion type of a configuration there. You see that we can lay them out differently. We can put 2 across, 3 across, or more. And then sometimes, like in the picture in the lower right-hand corner, we will couple these with other types of tools like flexible delineators or those types of things. If we have to, we try not to. But the whole point there is to make sure that we get good coverage from one side of the road to the other, because if we don't, we know that people will try to drive around them. So we work hard to make sure our design prevents that. We don't want anybody driving around it. When you have a curb on the side of the street, like you do on at least part of Bowling, that helps a lot, keep people from driving around them. But in a lot of neighborhoods, we don't. We just have flat shoulder, and so that becomes an issue sometimes. They're only about 3 inches tall. Most people will tell you that's tall enough, that it does its job. We can also order them in different lengths in the direction that traffic is going. The shorter they are, the more aggressive they are, and usually bring speeds down a little bit lower. We try to reserve those for our most urban areas. If you think of places like Germantown or East Nashville, where you've got a lot of pedestrian traffic, you've got a lot of things going on. We might use a 7-foot speed cushion. Our go-to, our default is really a 10.5 foot long cushion, but in more rural or very low density suburban areas, we can extend that out and go to a 14-foot cushion. So it's all about what target speed we're trying to achieve there.
Hey, Jeff,
Yes.
Before you move forward, there was one more question in the chat. Just when it becomes a good time to cover, someone was asking about what the calming project on Cherokee Road was. And so I think that was in the last slide. So I don't mean to interrupt your description of the different types of speed cushions, but want to make sure we get that covered before we move too far along.
Yeah, that's a good question. I remember the Cherokee Road project. I did not work on it specifically. I know there had been some speed cushions proposed. I think those got unproposed. I think those went away, but they came back and did kind of a different plan. As one of y'all probably knows better than I do, there may have been radar feedback signs put on there. There may have been some striping, but I don't think that there was speed cushions ever placed on Cherokee. I don't know if anybody else had better information than that. Sorry, I don't know the specifics of that one. That one goes back probably 2 or 3 years at least, I would say, but I remember the discussion on it. All right. Speed tables are a very close cousin. They look pretty much the same. They're just a different configuration of the speed cushion that we just looked at. We don't use these nearly as often because of the emergency response considerations. However, you will see them occasionally, things like in parks, where emergency response may not be as critical, and so they will make an appearance occasionally, but we try to stay with the speed cushions whenever possible. We do have some before and after data. I don't go too much into that because every project is really a little bit different, and so it really depends on how fast traffic was before the installation, and just different facets of the before and after data. But we are seeing a pretty substantial decline, something on the order of 9-12 miles an hour, again depending on the project. I saw another there's a good question there having to do with data, a very timely question about that diversion characteristic or that diversion component, where when we put speed cushions in, does it push traffic to one street or the other? And we get that sometimes. We are currently working on some of that data to be able to address that. Again, every street's going to be a little bit different, but in your case, you are on a grid pattern. I would expect that there might be some of that shifting. If you normally turn and come up Bowling and you're going to somewhere other than that, there's an easier street to do. Some of that may happen. We do hear of that it does happen. I don't doubt for all residents when they say that. So it's very hard to predict, but we don't have any data currently to speak to that. And then there's a question about, do we use speed tables in conjunction with existing stop signs? Almost never. I know that there have been I can think of a place over not too far away in Belmead. I believe it's on Ton, maybe at Linwood, where that was done. They actually kind of raised the whole intersection, and that is at an all-way stop. We almost never do that. We just don't find it to be a good use of the speed cushion apparatus when there's already a stop condition there. So that's a typical answer. Another tool that we have that kind of falls in the information or the education aspect that we looked at earlier would be a radar feedback sign. Sometimes just giving that information, that feedback back to a driver that, hey, you're really going a little too fast. We would like it if you slowed down. Just kind of flashing that before their eyes can be effective. Some people swear by them and say, since you put this on our street, it's absolutely doing its job. Other people say, well, it did, but it seems like it may have lost some of its effectiveness. So we do have a little bit of before and after data, but we really don't have any long-term type of data. So that's one that we typically reserve when we can't do something physical like the speed cushion. It can be kind of a better than nothing, but we would prefer to put something physical if we really want to bring down speeds. But it can be a really good reminder. Another tool that we have that is a little bit lower impact is narrowing, but that's not removing pavement. That's just maybe restriping it or introducing some striping that may not currently exist. We know that one of the things that creates some speeding often is just the visual lack of any obstacle. If it looks like a big wide road and it's straight like this one, looks like you can go fast on it. But if we can visually narrow that by introducing some striping, sometimes that's a good low cost way to do it. We don't often do it. Sometimes if we were to put like a double solid yellow line here, a center line on the street, sometimes that would communicate that it's a more major street than it actually is, and actually result in faster driving. But we do take a look at that, and we'll consider adding pavement markings. And a specialized example of that is in more urban areas where we might use bulb outs. many of our streets were built very wide and have these big sweeping radiuses that can encourage higher speed as you turn on or off of a street. And so occasionally we will, again, visually narrow that by introducing some types of striping. And then along with that, like in the picture in the upper right-hand corner there, some delineators that physically give you something to avoid so you can't just continue to drive quickly over that.
Hey, Jeff, it's Michael.
Sure.
The slides aren't advancing, so we're still back at the speed cushions.
I'm so sorry. So
Oh, that's fine.
I hope they're going now. There's the feedback sign. You've probably seen one of those. Just that's what we were looking at with the pavement markings. I was just trucking right along. It looked good on my end. I see the issue.
A big thank you to Michael for pointing that out. I was envisioning the signage that you were talking about, but there are also 2 additional points. So we want to make sure folks had an opportunity to see those additional slides that you described, but as well as someone already lifting up their concern about Craighead, which is a sister problem to Bowling Avenue, as well as a question. Are the slides supposed to be advancing from the speed? Oh, yeah. Sorry.
We got it.
Then the answer to that last question is yes.
That's right.
Sorry, I'm just now reading that. So.
Yeah, and on Craighead, if what's being asked there is like it has a speeding problem as well, that's the way I take it to mean a sister problem to Bowling. What we would recommend is that in the next traffic calming application that you can submit an application on that, and we will collect the data, and it would go into the same process.
I think we just don't want to push the problem off of one street and onto another.
Agree, and nor do we, and that does become an issue. So yeah, we will.
Well, it's also going to put traffic on Greenway as well, which is a very narrow street and
parking on both sides.
On both sides.
And there have been accidents on that vehicle to vehicle
On
on Greenway. There's been a fatality 12 years ago. I believe there was a traffic fatality 12 years ago at the intersection Greenway. If not a fatality, a major hospitalization 12 years ago at the intersection of Greenway and Central. I worry this Bowling traffic calming is going to push traffic over to Greenway and to Cherokee because those are the
clearly will. I don't think there's any doubt it will. And I'm not sure who even submitted this. I 118 Bowling, and I've spoken to my neighbors, and I met my neighbor Lee Cohen, who owns 126 and 128.
I've been here 40 years, so
he's never seen an accident on Bowling. I've been here 30 years.
Except when Lauren hadn't filmed a film across the street. That's the only time we've had any kind of tragedy. I've never seen one.
And in 30 years, I've never seen an accident on Bowling. We have sidewalks on both sides.
I mean, signage would be okay. The flashing on Cherokee seems to help. I always slow down when I come through Cherokee. And I've been on Charlotte. If you want to talk about an engineering nightmare, that 46th Avenue where you're dog-legged over in oncoming traffic is terrible. I don't know what engineer came up with that, but that's terrible.
Hey, guys, could we
wait
until
excuse me.
until we get through the slides before we have a discussion?
All right,
can we do that?
Marty and everybody, thank you for making sure, and Mr. Gamble, thank you for speaking up and making sure we didn't miss anything. But I appreciate Kitty. We'll make sure we keep moving this forward so you get an opportunity to hear the additional presentation. Are there any other specific questions about where he is in the presentation, moving from bulb outs over to chicanes?
Oh, you're off.
All right, I'll keep going there. Chicanes, again, kind of a specialized. You guys may be familiar down there with Kenner. It had chicanes for a long time. Fairfax as well. Neither one of those two far from you.
46.
Those are about the only places that I'm familiar with. So it's not something that we use very often, but it kind of introduces an artificial meandering of a street to try to slow traffic down. And then the last one is traffic circle. So again, you have to have an awful lot of pavement there.
Even
for that to work. And so we
Sorry,
really,
could we ask that everyone mute if they're not presenting, please? There's some background talking going on.
so we don't often recommend traffic circles unless we have an awful big intersection out there.
I have
All
a
right,
question.
so let's move. Yeah, go ahead.
How close to the stop calming Cushing?
I'm sorry, you kind of broke up there. Were you asking how close to a stop sign? Let me go through the proposed plan, and then we'll kind of tailor our. Sorry, I couldn't hear the whole question, but I'll go through this, and then we can have something to talk from here. So this is what we have very preliminarily put together in terms of the traffic calming project. If you look on the left-hand side, you'll see West End and the little traffic signal there. So I apologize, but just to kind of maximize our screen, north is to the right here. And then traveling from left to right, you cross Richland, you see those two stop signs. That just indicates for us that is a stop on Bowling. I know that's an always stop or a four-way stop there. Same thing as you move further to the right on Central, we also have an always stop. And then we have our longest stretch of just kind of uninterrupted driving from Central down to Murphy on the far right-hand side of the picture there. The way we lay these out, and by the way, what we have proposed are two sets of speed cushions on that section from Central to Murphy. And the way we lay these out is we will take the whole length of the section that we're looking at, and we will consider things like an always stop. You have there at Richland and you have there at Central. And because that becomes kind of at least a slow down condition, hopefully it's a stop condition. I know not everybody stops fully at those, but hopefully there's at least a slow down condition. We kind of consider those to be sections that already have some form of traffic calming on them. That may be a bad assumption, and you guys can certainly tell me if that's true. But when we look at that, we try to break the segment up into a desirable spacing for traffic to slow down. We're typically looking at something between 400 and 600 feet, maybe a little closer together, maybe a little further apart, depending on the context of the street. But in an area like this, I would think if we're in the I'd say probably 300 to 450 foot range or something for a spacing. Just given the density and the land use that we have here in the neighborhood. I think we will find that that's close enough together that it does a good job of slowing traffic down. Folks don't clear one set of speed cushions and step on the gas just to fly down to the next one, typically. But it's far enough apart that what we're trying to do is not push traffic to other streets. We don't want a project to be so onerous that traffic will say, forget it, I can't even drive on this street anymore. We try to strike a good balance between, speed reduction and continuing to maintain our network of streets as we know them today. So that's what we're trying to do. The reason you don't see any speed cushions in between Central and Richland or West End is because from the light at West End to the stop sign is right at 400 feet up to Richland. And then it's about the same from Richland to Central. So we didn't find that there was probably enough room to dictate that there would be a speed cushion in between that. But, that's certainly up for debate at this point. It becomes kind of a mixture of art and science. And so if there's a lot of opposition to that, we can revisit that. But from Central to Murphy, we find that it's a little over 1,000 feet there. And we think that would work very nicely to have two sets of speed cushions and would give us that 350 foot spacing that we think would be pretty appropriate here. So I'll stop. I'd love to hear feedback on what you're looking at. You like it, you hate it, don't like it, you hate it, those types of things.
Can I say something?
Yeah, again, please keep me.
So we're at the corner. We're at the corner.
We're at the corner of Richland and Bowling. People run through daily. We're at the corner of Richland and Bowling, and we see people run daily.
I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute and see if I can. Yeah, it looked.
Mary, are you and Bill in the same house? In the same location?
Try it now, Kitty. Maybe she's on mute. Can y'all hear me? Can you hear Michael?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't know where. Mary Hance, are you there? Oh, what happened? Okay. Well, I'll speak up because I live on that corner too, and I've had some email with Jeff and all that, with Jeff and Brenda. And I think this kind of first came up from the fact that from Richland to West End, when those people see that green light, I mean, they're popping going, 45 miles an hour, no joke. And they'll blow through the stop sign. And that's an issue, because we've got West End middle kids, we've got the synagogue, and there's a bunch of people that park right there, on Bowling, and my side and the other side, and, they're opening their doors and they about get knocked out. And so that was part of our kind of 4 block area, our 4 houses area, saying, hey, can we slow it down there? Because literally, if it's not 40, it's 50. And they just gun it. So they'll gun it right through the stop sign, trying to hit that green light, because it's probably about a 4-minute light. And if you don't hit it, you're going to be sitting there a while. And then the synagogue kind of queues, during certain times where they're backed up with the kids getting out of school, and kids are getting in their cars and stuff. So that's kind of what I feel like. I don't know where Mary went. I don't know where Kitty went. But that's the thing. And let me say this. This was sent into by Bowling residents. And so nobody's intent is to putting on Greenway. And I don't know why. Greenway neighborhood, because this isn't a Rowena thing. This is a people that live on Bowling thing. And you can submit to Greenway. You can submit it. Because I'm 100% agreement. People fly down that street, they cut through that street, totally. But I kind of surfaced this around. This is about safety and the kids and elderly people that are walking. So that's where I am with it.
Right. And Laura just made a good point that, a lot of kids stand on my corner in the morning to wait for the school bus. So there are kids out there on the street in the morning, and people trying to get to work. And then there are lots of kids walking home from the middle school, and kids going in and out of the synagogue. And that really was the driver of our application for, these, for traffic calming. And
put them on your side. Ask her where she lives.
Where? What? I live at the corner of Bowling and Richland.
Oh, so there won't be any then by you, though. On the block where I live, where they seem to propose putting them, Mr. Cohen lives too. No one seems to want them, at least on our side of the street. I can say I've spoken to the homeowners at 114, 116, I own 118. 120, 122, and Mr. Cohen owns 126 and 128, and we are all opposed. Yeah. And we're never contacted or even. I thought this was a meeting to discuss the possibility of it. It sounds like we're being told it's going to happen.
No, that's not. That's not
hold
true.
On. Wait 1 second. On the Jeff, if you'll walk through very quickly kind of the process. It starts with the application. then the approval of the application, and then it starts with the community engagement and the feedback. And Kitty, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it would be helpful, Jeff, if you want to kind of take a moment to walk through. So this is the kind of the first phase of letting all the neighbors know that, hey, this has been applied for, it's been approved. By approved, it means it's qualified to receive attention from this program through NDOT. Jeff, will you walk through what that, and we're going to have a bunch of questions that we don't want to miss that's in the chat, and I know other folks who have unmuted, and so we'll want to make sure we give space to everyone. But will you walk through where we are in this process, how people engage from this point moving forward as well?
Sure. What we're trying to do tonight is just present to you, let you know that there is a project out there, there's potential for one, and then try to achieve some consensus on what that project could look like. If we can do that tonight, here's the steps moving forward. So we're at the neighborhood meeting. We would go back and we would refine that, whatever we come up with tonight. It's maybe that's shifting the project to one end, maybe it's introducing new speed cushions or taking some out, whatever we feel like needs to be a part of that. We will do that in a design process. We can come back if you want to. It sounds like we might want to do that. There's a lot of neighborhoods that just say, no, we're ready to go. Don't come back. Let's just move forward as quickly as possible. So that one is optional. What's not optional, though, is we would do an online ballot. So those of you who might be very opposed to it, you still have a voice in this. That's the whole point about us coming and meeting and talking to you. And the fairest way we know to help make these decisions is to let everybody have a say in that. And so we do an online ballot process for anyone who owns property along a street that is to be traffic calmed. We'll talk more about that, how that works. And then if that passes, then we move into the construction queue after that. And so you can see some rough time frames. So in no case is any of this happening very quickly. We'll go through this process, but I would hazard a guess to say, even if traffic calming does come to the street, we're still probably about a year away, 10 months to a year, something like that. So,
oh boy,
the way we do the voting process is we send this card out. It's pretty straightforward. Everyone, again, that has property on the street would get one of these, and then you just log in, or you can call in and just let them know if you're in favor of it or not. We hold that vote open for 6 weeks, and at the end of the 6 weeks, we tally all of those, and it takes 2/3 of the respondents to vote for it for us to move forward with that. The people, I think it's pretty straightforward on this street. This is just a snapshot. This is not the whole street, but again, if you have property that abuts the right of way of bowling, you would be allowed to vote for this. The churches and all get one vote, just like everybody else. I don't think we have any other condos or apartments or anything like that. I don't know that anything's vacant, and I don't know that we have any businesses. So that's pretty much how that works. So if you have any questions on that, but yeah, that's a good suggestion. That's kind of where we go from here, but so I hope that helps.
Sorry, I just want to make sure folks hear where we are in the process. I know you're wanting to kind of jump back in to make sure we are able to give feedback on, so make sure you hear everyone's feedback and whether or not you take the section by section through Bowling Avenue, because we'll have folks that will be adamantly opposed to this, and we'll have folks that will be adamantly supportive, and then we'll have folks both, whether you're supportive or you're opposed, will still be wanting to put input, or at least that's been my experience with other neighborhood traffic calming. So it's very, so if you may be opposed, but you still want to give input. You may be supportive and you still want to give input. So we just want to make sure that you've got an opportunity to give that information back to Jeff here. And then I will double check the chat, Jeff, while others share information with you.
Yeah, that and that QR code that I showed at the very beginning, and the best way to remember that is Nashville.gov. That also is a great way to give official feedback on the project as well.
May I ask one more thing?
Sure.
So if the people on the end of Bowling, on the Murphy Road end of Bowling, are against the cushions, and the people who are between Central and West End want the cushions. Is there a way to put the cushions in that area and not on the other end of bowling?
I think we would entertain it. Now, let me be real clear. I am a consultant that works for NDOT. I'm a private engineering consultant. So so I can't answer that right here and now, but I will certainly take that question back to NDOT to say if we were to vote and one section is really in favor and we can break it because there's a four-way stop in between and it still makes a good project of a very short one, but it still may kind of meet the needs of what the residents in that block are asking for, and it still makes some sense. Can we dissect that out and break it out? I'll ask that question, but I don't have an answer for you tonight.
Because we don't believe that the stop sign at Richland is slowing people down effectively. And so we thought that the cushion might be an extra thing that would slow people down. I mean, that's what we're interested in, is slowing people down so that somebody doesn't get killed on that corner.
I understand, and the speeding to try to make the light makes all the sense in the world. The fact that you've got school speed limits there makes sense. If I were going to try to put something in addition, I would probably spot a speed cushion, one in between Central and Richland, about mid-block. I know there's an alley there. We're not going to obstruct that, but on one side or the other, and then the same thing from Richland to West End. I don't think that's an unreasonable request, and I think it just becomes a matter of if we do that and the ballot goes, it's obviously some folks are in favor and some blocks are not, then how do we deal with that? But
well, I would also ask this, Jeff, if we may. I think what Mary's describing is absolutely what happens at the intersection of Richland and Craighead. And I think once the speed bumps would be up on Bowling, that we would be the lucky recipients of a lot of that additional traffic. And same as Mary, I think 2 speed bumps in between Central and Richland on the Craighead side would, in addition to what Mary's describing on Bowling, would really do a huge, be very effective and just calming it all down, because it all seems to be right up here in this section of Central, Richland, Bowling, Central, Richland, Craighead.
Yeah, I understand. And so, what we have not done in the past is expand the project over to another street, but that's another thing I can take back. And we can check that out. That would trigger a whole new process. We'd want to make sure the folks on Craighead, are aware and that kind of thing. But
yeah, I think they would all jump for joy.
Jeff, in addition to that follow-up question, and I think that was probably the conclusion of that follow-up, so hopefully I didn't cut you off there, but there are a few additional questions back here, and some of them you've already been able to respond to, but I want to make sure we get to those. About other options, one is kind of in general, are these the only options what's been presented by you today, or will there be additional options like flashing lights? Someone's asked about a roundabout. Someone's asked about, sorry, I'm just kind of scrolling through here. Maybe that was an older one. Can there be cushions on part of Bowling versus all of Bowling? You've addressed some of that we'll do a follow-up. May not do anything to solve the problem of speeding, running stop signs. Of course, that's the side streets. Do you measure speed in a single location on Bowling Avenue or at multiple points?
Good question.
I think we've gotten, yeah.
It's a single location.
Okay. Were there any discussions with the synagogue school about the drop-off and pickup to make it safer? that's, I think, been a conversation in the past, but something we can also, they will also have the ability to have input, so we can
We don't need to
check in there as well.
I'm on the board of the school, and it hasn't had a problem to date with any incidents or accidents.
Okay. Thank you, Marty. I did make sure the rabbi was able to be aware of the traffic calming meeting as well, but you can also make sure they're looped in. And then and then someone was asking a question about the 46th near Park and Elkins. I know that neighborhood association and those neighbors have worked really closely with you and NDOT through the 46th Avenue updates, and someone's asking about that.
That's it.
Here's the emergency question.
And then there's a question about emergency vehicles. And then a negative impacts about additional streets. So I think that probably some of that's been answered, but with the exception of the emergency vehicles, and anything you want to comment on the 46th Avenue. I know we had quite a few community meetings on that because it was a slightly different project than just traffic calming.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the 46th Avenue, so I can't
That was
comment
Anna
on
Dearman over
Okay.
at NDOT. So folks with specific questions on that, I can make sure we spent quite a lot of time with those neighbors there. But it wasn't a traffic calming specific. It was a repaving and some other additions that they asked for.
As far as the emergency response, we work. We don't go project by project. We have had meetings with Chief Swan and with the emergency operators. They're supportive of the project. They've essentially told us there is no street where it's a deal killer for them. They will navigate any form of traffic calming. So
won't it slow them down though? Their response time?
I'm
I'm sorry. What?
Won't it slow their response time down?
I'd have to ask. I mean, you can ask them, but they've pretty much given us the green light because I think they see the trade-off between safer streets.
The additional thing too with the size of the but yeah, sorry, I get this question a lot with whether or not emergency services has evaluated the traffic calming options, and so I can make sure we do a follow-up. I get a follow-up information, but essentially some of the sizes allows for of the options that are listed that were shown earlier allow for emergency vehicles to pass safely. So those have been reviewed by emergency services, as he said, Chief Swan and their folks. But I can make sure to follow up on that with Jeff.
It would seem like if we have sidewalks on both sides, and I know in 30 years we've never had an accident with the pedestrian, and Mr. Cohen knows in 47 years we hadn't had one on this block. It might make sense if we needed to slow traffic down from 32, which is what, 2 or maybe 7 miles over the speed limit, to put the flashing sign like on Cherokee Road, do the striping. And then I agree, the most dangerous part is people blowing through from West End at a high speed. But really the most dangerous thing on Bowling Avenue are FedEx trucks, UPS trucks, Amazon food delivery, and lawn people who park in the street and force people to go in the wrong lane of traffic. That's far more dangerous, and speed bumps will have nothing to do to help that.
Yeah, I understand. I see those in about every neighborhood. So, yeah.
Hey, could I ask a question about logistics? And I apologize if you mentioned this already. We're on 113 Bowling, so we are just above the crest of the significant hill coming up from Murphy. And just looking at where you're putting the speed cushions, one issue that I've seen over and over again is people don't have good visibility coming up over that hill, and they don't have time to stop if there's something beyond that blind spot. Is that something you guys already accounted for, and where the cushions would go, that people slowing down over those cushions, would not have a faster vehicle coming behind them that would be an issue?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. That's a good point. Sometimes there's enough hills on a street that we will actually highlight, areas of significant grade. I know there is one there. We have some guidelines that keep us from installing cushions on grades. 5% we try to stay off of, and we absolutely will stay away from anything steeper than 8%. What we will do in this case, we've not been out in the field to look at that. We can tell it's flat enough to put the cushion, but you make a good point there. And so that may shift a little bit one side or the other. I think it's probably okay, but we will be taking a look at that. The other thing that helps with that is the signage, and you see an example of the sign in the bottom right-hand corner there. That goes very near to those speed cushion locations as well, and so that helps them stand out a little bit more also.
May I speak up?
You may.
I don't think any individual can speak for the entirety of Bowling Avenue, specifically between Murphy Road and Central. It's a constant hazard space on that part of the street because people are flying down and screeching their brakes at Murphy Road. I don't think anybody speaks for the entirety of it.
My name is Helen Barber. I live at 105 Bowling Avenue, and I'm right next to the church. So when people come over that hill, they are flying. I cannot tell you the number of times I have almost been hit by people flying over that hill. I'm very much in favor of some type of calming, speed bumps, whatever, put between Bowling and Central. Since Central and Richland have the stop signs, that slows traffic down. But there are a lot of people here on Bowling that also experience the same thing I do. I know my neighbors across the street, my neighbors next door, my neighbors across up 2 doors down. We're all experiencing the same thing, that they come flying over that hill, and I have to literally stop every time I'm coming down Bowling from West End to look over that hill to make sure that I don't get hit turning into my own driveway. And I just want that to people to be aware of that. That is where the real hazard is. It's coming over that hill for the residents that live more towards Murphy Road than towards Richland or Central.
Thank you. And someone else also lifted up which I know it's been another concern by Bill. I think you've lifted up to me before, the 18-wheelers or the large trucks that have been starting to use some of this area as a cut through, which is that's another thing that's been lifted up. And then signage to warn pedestrians that crossing near the crest of the hill is very dangerous. In another city, this was a fatal incident by someone, or someone was sharing. I think we've covered most of the ones in the chat. I just want to make sure those got covered as well.
How do you check? Here we go.
How many what?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that or hear that question.
See that?
Oh, if you want to be in the chat and not unmute and speak up, there should be on the right-hand side of your screen opportunity. It says chat. You can type questions in there. You can also unmute and speak up.
What do you take?
I live at 3606 Meadowbrook, so I'm 2 houses removed from Bowling. And, you know, this impacts everybody that is adjacent to Bowling as well, but we don't have a vote. And I think that's rather unfair. You know, I use Bowling Avenue every single day. I walk on it almost every single day. I drive on it every single day. And yet this is going to impact me greatly, but I have no legal say as to whether this is going to be accomplished or not.
It's going to impact you greatly.
A little unfair. Yeah, it's going to impact me greatly. And sorry, Marianne, but I'll be using Craighead a lot more if they put speed cushions on Bowling.
Me too, Gary.
Yeah, I appreciate you lifting that. I know that's a constant concern regarding the voting requirements that we lift up to NDOT regarding kind of that engagement piece. Right now, that's the voting requirements they have. They also, even if you're a long-time renter, if you've been in a home for 20 years, that also, you know, you're also prohibited from the actual voting in that area too. But I just want to recognize that as a concern that you've lifted up, and you're not alone in this part of the traffic calming process with those concerns.
Is there a possibility that a speed bump or cushion could be placed at a stop sign? Because the problem, I don't see a lot of speeding on Murphy Road. Now, there may be speeding that I don't see because, again, I don't live on it. I mean, on Bowling. I'm 2 houses removed. But
there is speeding.
The problem seems to be people rolling through the stop signs. That's the problem I see. And if there could be a cushion or something to slow people down at the stop sign and then let them proceed, I think that might be helpful.
Or before the stop or at the stop sign.
Yeah, there's one project that comes to mind where we did propose something very near to the stop sign because there was a big concern about people, hardly slowing down at all. If they're rolling through now, that's pretty much going to be unaffected by a speed cushion. That's the intent, that you can still go about 20 miles an hour over the speed cushion, and so. To put that at the stop sign, it might have some benefit. But if the real issue is, safety around the synagogue or speeding up to try and catch the light, having it back at the stop sign might not be the most effective. So I'm not going to say there's a rule we don't put it at a stop sign, but typically it's not the most effective there.
And then, Jeff, there's another engagement here about asking how about the least restrictive measure, signage, flashing speed limit signs. So maybe that's something that could also be incorporated. Or with some of these, is it just either or can we look at a couple of different measures, since some people are kind of wanting to perhaps see some different options?
Yeah, the way we typically go about it, this question comes up some, is like, can we start with the least effective and see if that works? And that's a great idea. That's a very logical way to go about it. Unfortunately, the problem with that is, given the backlog and the time it takes to develop these and everything that we've got, we just don't have time to go to a neighborhood, put something out, evaluate it, circle back in a year and reevaluate it again. We would never get done, I think, with a lot of these projects. And so what we try to do is come up with a project that we think will be at the most effective, and if we meet with resistance, and the way we know, because someone spoke up, said it's very hard for one person to speak to everybody that lives on the street. We understand that, and that's why we typically will finish a project and then go to the vote with it. And in the event that it does not pass, what we will typically do then, if we were to do it in that section from Central to Murphy, let's say it overwhelmingly fails and people say, no, this is not for us, we would typically then back and do what we call a plan B, which is something a little least restrictive at that point. It might be a feedback sign or something like that. It almost always is a feedback sign. We know people don't have as many concerns about that. And so that's the way we go about the kind of start with the more effective. And if that does not pass, we'll go to something that might be a little least intrusive.
What is a feedback sign?
That's that radar feedback sign, this one here, that you may have seen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to say, from the beginning, y'all get over 600 applications, during each period. And we were in the top 50, which I think says something to the fact that there's an issue, that there's speeding and there are other issues, or we wouldn't be in the top 50. So, to deny that there's any speeding, I think is it's not true. We have issues, or we wouldn't have been picked to be in the top 50. So I think we need to try to make everybody happy in some way without denying that we have a problem.
For you.
Based on
I will.
hard to see the problem.
So Jeff, there was one thing I wanted to lift up to folks. It is true. Elmington went through this process. I think it was last year. It was a very close vote, and where you need, to meet that 2/3 threshold. And now we're going back where they didn't receive their speed tables, speed cushions, whatever their final selection was. And so we now for additional calming measures, trying to look at those. And then there's folks there that are, wanting to try to reapply again. So it is a process. And Kitty, I appreciate you lifting that up. For those that want to, I think, there's rarely 100% consensus, but if you can pull together all the ideas you may have, like I said, even if you're opposed to it or if you're supportive of it, but pulling those ideas, getting those questions or additional suggestions with the tools that were listed, that will greatly improve. And Jeff, could you then come back to us with an additional plan for folks to look at, especially once we get information from NDOT to see whether or not these two sections could be, or the sections could be perhaps even sectioned off, whether it's 2 sections or more.
I think that's a great way to go about it. I'm going to give you some resources here. You have NDOT's email, you have my email, and then you also have that QR code. I showed that earlier, and that would be a great way that you as individually, or you can get together and talk to your neighbors. We always encourage that. And stew on this for a little while. We're not in any giant hurry here, so we're kind of working on your behalf. We're sort of your engineer and trying to develop a good project for the street. But go into this engage.Nashville.gov, and there's a map there where you can add those little push pins and put comments where you see issues, the types of things you see. Maybe you've got ideas that we need to consider. And let's take some time for you all to think about it and talk about it and give us that feedback. And then, yes, what we'll do is come back and we'll adjust the plan where we need to do something that I think we'll do our best. But I think that's absolutely right. We're probably not going to make everybody 100% happy, but we'll try to come up with a plan that receives as much consensus as possible, and we'll get together again on it. I think that's
Hey, Jeff, I appreciate your presentation. When will we circle back around? Are we a month out or 6 weeks? How does that typically work in your expertise?
Yeah, I mean, if everybody said looks good, we're ready. I mean, again, we probably wouldn't even have a meeting. We will typically at this point go back and do more of the detailed engineering. But in this case, if we're still kind of batting some ideas back and forth, we may be a little further than that. We could be, depending on when we get this feedback, if we get, a good, tomorrow came in and we got good 10 responses and stuff, and we're ready to kind of take that and move forward with a plan, we probably need 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, for us to develop something, and we always like to have a minimum 3 weeks of lead time for these meetings, just to be sure the mail gets everything on time and people know about the meeting itself. So, we're probably talking about a month to a month and a half, best case, before we can get back to you again.
But you'll take back the feedback that you've received today, so we don't need to go to that, to put feedback online if we've already given it today, correct?
It's never a bad idea, but I think we've got everything that we heard. I mean, I think we would make some changes based on what we heard tonight, but it's never bad. I'm never going to discourage you from giving us that feedback on that platform.
Yeah, I think that's always good encouragement. It's great to hear that the information that was shared tonight by individuals has been received. It's recorded, so we can also make sure Jeff, the team gets to hear this feedback. But I know it's always helpful. If you're concerned at all, do send that email do send that that feedback in written form, just to make sure your mind's at ease if you're on this call listening. There were a couple additional questions, Jeff. I know I think we've perhaps got a little bit more time with you, or as much time as it takes for folks to be here. Definitely not rushing anyone. Everyone here's my evening, so I'm happy to spend it with everyone this way. But there are a couple additional questions, and I see some folks that are unmuted that may still want to speak up, and I'm probably taking up their space. But Pamela has put in the chat here. She recall what are the options available? Is there a list? I know you walked through some of those earlier, but that would be really helpful. But that's a touch base, or we just get this presentation out via email, because the recording might take. I know it takes a little bit of time to get a recording cleaned up on your end. And then someone was asking, where are we out time-wise from balloting? And then the final question, do your traffic counts include type of vehicle? For example, the heavy truck versus a passenger vehicle. So those are three kind of questions that are in the chat in the last. So if you'll take a moment to make sure those get responded to.
Sure. On the first one, the options available, I just put up another QR code. Sorry for all this, but if you just Google the Metro Traffic Calming Program, you will go to the website for the program. And one of the options there is to obtain the procedures manual for the program. It gets into all of the detail about how we vote and all of this kind of stuff. But one of the things in there is that toolbox of different countermeasures that we use. So that's a great place to go if you want to learn more about what might be available in terms. But again, every street has limitations, and you can't put circles just everywhere, and you can't put chicanes everywhere and those kind of things. But you can at least see what might be available there. On the traffic count question, we do have that information. We do look at heavy vehicles. If there's a large percentage or heavy trucks, that will often temper our view of it. I don't think we have that in this case, but we do have some passenger vehicle versus truck data that is available. And
at one point I thought someone said that like semi-tractor trailer trucks are prohibited from going on bowling. Is that true or not true? And if it's true, could we get a sign that says that semi-tractor trailer trucks are prohibited on our streets?
Yeah, it's kind of the reverse. It's the sign that makes it true or not true. I don't think you are posted as a no truck route. So right now, yeah, it's legal for trucks to use any street that's not posted. I don't know if you're posted or not. I don't think you are, but
how do you get something posted?
I will send a note over to NDOT right now and make sure I copy the neighborhood president so she can distribute this info. So I'll make sure I move that forward.
And that I think is still a decision of the Traffic and Parking Commission. It is an appointed board, and Metro makes those decisions.
It is that, in addition to if you want to seek an additional stop sign that's not already pre-approved, that also has to go before Traffic and Calming. But I've got a couple of things I'm pushing forward through Sylvan Park, so happy to add that to the list, and we'll send that to NDOT right now. And Luann, I'm gonna copy you just for the purposes. Anyone else is welcome to be copied to that. I just want to make sure I don't jam up people's inboxes, but I'll do that right now.
And then there was a question about balloting. It says we're asking if we are 4 to 6 weeks from balloting. Right now, balloting is not on the schedule. We will not go to a ballot until we have developed more fully the traffic calming project. And so I think we're committing to coming back and showing you another version of a project before we're ready to talk about the balloting schedule. So right now that's not on the horizon.
Quick question, Jeff. Do you guys have any data? Let's say if we were to shrink it down to one speed cushion right there, how that impacts kind of before and after versus putting, like Valley Brook's got 20, it seems like. Do y'all come back and look at that, or?
We are starting to in limited cases, but we don't have before and after data on every project. We have it on very few. Yeah, but you're saying if we were to put one speed cushion between Richland and West End, what we might expect to see there?
Right, and by eliminating one, not on the hill, because I get where that's really dangerous, but on further down after you know, that second one as you're heading south.
Yeah, yeah.
Like switched it, moved that one up, just have two.
And hey, Michael, one other thought I had as we've been talking about this is, maybe a compromise on the end of bowling where we live. Instead of two cushions, you do one cushion with the hill there, and then a three-way stop at Meadowbrook.
Yeah.
Have you seen traffic during rush? It was last week. They were backed up well past Central. That would horribly snarl traffic and just create a terrible traffic jam and make it impossible to get out on the street from there with that. That'd be silly.
Yeah, we don't do stop signs as part of this program, and so again, that's another decision of the Traffic and Parking Commission, but that's not something we can do as part of traffic calming.
Last week was one specific incident due to a car accident.
Right, but it happens often, at least once or twice a month, like that. When it's
I don't think it does. I think that you're
in the 30 years I've lived here, it has. That's what, and Mr. Cohen, who's lived here 47, agrees with me too.
We lived here 35 and disagree.
Yeah, well, do you still live here now, or do you rent the property?
Hey, let's be kosher, guys. Marty, come on, man. Thank you.
Just asking a legitimate question.
Well, no, it's not a legitimate question.
Not
but
legitimate.
The answer is she
Legitimate.
doesn't rent. She lives here. Is to answer your question. She does live here.
Okay. Let's see here. Are there any other questions in the chat this morning? All right. Jeff, is there anything else? I know timing wise, we're going to take the information you've received tonight and any information that folks send you in between now. I would encourage folks, it would be really great if we could get this information, to you no later than a week or two from now. I know that feels rushed for some. For others, it's going to feel too long. But if we could kind of put an internal of making sure you just get this feedback within the next couple of weeks, that would allow us to kind of follow up. And what I don't want to happen is that nothing happens with this momentum that you've got on this opportunity, even though we've got plenty of time, as Jeff had listed. Even if everyone came to this call today and said, absolutely, we love this plan, we're ready to move forward to a vote, that's not, clearly that's not it. But even that, it would be probably almost 2 months from now before we'd be moving forward, or 6 weeks from a vote. We're not there, but if we can provide information to Jeff, and then Jeff, if you could have a follow-up to us in the next couple of weeks. I know I'll put a tickler on the calendar to make sure folks are doing a couple of things, getting information to you and to NDOT through the methods you've already shared. If they've shared it here, I know that's going to be captured, but if they want to make sure it's shared, they can do that in writing as well. And then to circle up with folks with when you think you'll have any revised plans to present to folks, that we'll have a group here that will make sure that I don't miss any key points. So I'm really thankful on that, making sure that we're able to follow up with everyone. At that point, once there's a
you don't have to
updated, any kind of updated presentation from you, will we come back to then do this type of presentation one more time? So folks with information on an updated version?
Yes, ma'am. I think that's the best way to do it. We're also happy to meet in person, but yeah, we would come back again and do another meeting like this to show everyone what revisions we came up with.
I'm really grateful to, I think, Michael and others on this. And if I'm leaving someone off, just let you know, thank you for making sure we coordinated and found a date for this, for the purpose during the summer. I think a lot of folks are traveling, so I think it did help to have this virtually. I know that's not always the easiest or best way for folks to engage. So if we do it in person, we'll likely reach out to Otter Creek. They're really open and generous with their big spaces in there, if we need to do something in person, which is always a wonderful option. But this is, so what we'll do is come back with additional choices, and then Jeff, you'll work on getting some more information from NDOT from some of the specific questions.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And then Kitty, you had unmuted. I want to make sure I'm looking at everybody here to make sure if you've unmuted, I want to make sure you have an opportunity, and Michael, and then maybe some others. But if you wanted to make sure you ask any final questions.
I think the only thing I was going to say was, we were asked to choose whether we would prefer a Zoom or a meeting in person, and we chose a Zoom. But if people would rather have a meeting in person, that was certainly an option. And we just chose this for the first meeting, but we could always do something else. And then I just want to add, thank you, Brenda, for your time. And thank you, Jeff, for your time.
And Kitty, I think the idea behind having more of a Zoom call is that we have mute buttons. At a meeting, there aren't any. Sorry.
Well, it does get hard, especially I know everybody everything matters to everyone, especially right outside your front door. And I think that's a good point. So sometimes it can get really difficult in community meetings. And I know, and it's all because we all care. And I know that's the space that everyone comes from. And we may not agree with each other on the exact approach. But I just urge each one of you are here because you care. You've lived in this neighborhood longer than I have. I've only been there for about 12 or so years. So each one of you care deeply. And it's because of that we've got a beautiful neighborhood. So thank you. And Kitty, thank you for lifting that up. I thought the best choice to kind of get something going. I think you all made a great choice with getting us all on the call. And then we can, as she lifted up, can absolutely make an alternate choice for the next gathering. And is there anyone else? Michael, did you unmute, or did anyone else? And I've just got a few names on my screen. I know I can scroll down to make sure I'm not missing anyone. Okay, and wonderful. And I think we covered everything in the chat. Can we hear Lyle's question discussed? Sorry if I missed Lyle's question. Is there any evidence that cushions make more drivers honor stop signs? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to speak over anybody.
No, I saw that. No, we don't have any specific data like that, or yielding to pedestrians, or any of those things that kind of come along with it. What we often tell people, though, is if we can slow speed down in general over the course of the road, it fixes a lot of issues. It makes sight distance issues better. It makes yielding to pedestrians better. It makes stopping at stop signs easier. All of those kind of things tend to kind of come along with lower speeds, but we don't have any data that says here's what we would expect to see. It was a good question. That's all the information that we have. We appreciate everyone joining tonight. And again, this recording will be available here in the next couple of days.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Jeff, thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good evening.